visa. I'm going to give you an overview of what this visa program is all about and share with you some of the key requirements, the most important requirements that you need to know. I'm not going to go through all the detailed legal requirements because that's a bit complicated, but I want you to have at least a clear overall understanding of what it typically takes and the key points you need to pay attention to as you're trying to determine whether you can qualify for the E-2 visa. Okay. All right. So what is the E-2 investor visa? It is a temporary visa that allows foreign entrepreneurs to live and work in the United States by investing in a U.S. business. Now, the entrepreneur may bring his or her spouse and minor children to the United States with them. The children can go to public school just like American kids. The spouse can be a homemaker or go to school or work. The spouse has a lot of options and freedom in what he or she wants to do. The E-2 investor, the primary applicant, will be required to work in the business, focus on making the business successful. So the primary investor is required to be fully engaged in managing and operating the E-2 business. Now, a very important requirement of the E-2 visa is that it is only available to citizens of treaty countries. What that means is the foreign country needs to have a specific E-2 treaty with the United States in order to have this visa available to them. Okay, out of about 200 countries in the world, currently there are 80 countries that have the required treaty. So one of the first things you need to do is to determine whether you're a citizen of a treaty country. Now, there are many people that have multiple nationality. We call that dual nationality. As long as one of your citizenship is on the treaty list, you can apply for the E-2 investor visa. And this is true for many Brazilians and many Venezuelans. I've had clients from both of these countries that been able to apply for the E-2 visa based on their second nationality. I understand a lot of Brazilians have second nationalities in Europe due to their ancestry. So that is a very viable way of qualifying for an E-2 investor visa. Now, the E-2 visa, it is a temporary visa. It's not green card or U.S. citizenship. It's a temporary visa granted in 2 to 5 year increments, depending on what country you're from. Every treaty specifies a different length of E-2 visa duration. For example, if you have Italian passport or Spanish passport or British passport, you're eligible for up to a 5-year E-2 visa. Canadians are also eligible for up to a 5-year E-2 visa. On the other hand, Swiss citizens and Australians get a 4-year, Singaporeans get a 2-year. So you can tell that the visa duration varies depending on the country of nationality. Now, the E-2 visa is renewable forever in 2 to 5 year increment. As long as you keep running your business in the U.S., you can just keep renewing it. You can renew it until you're 80 years old if you want. There is no limit to the amount of renewals you can apply for with the E-2 investor visa. Now here you see on your screen some of the major countries where E-2 visa applicants come from. But there's a full list of 80 countries, and that's all comprehensively provided on my website called e2visalawyer.net. I encourage you to check out the website for the complete list as well as a lot of other E-2 investor visa information that you can use as a resource to understand what the requirements are. Okay, so one of the most popular questions I get a candidate is, how much do I have to invest? And this is a point of confusion for a lot of people because the law is very ambiguous. It simply states that you have to make a substantial investment in a qualifying U.S. business. And the U.S. government intentionally left the amount ambiguous because the U.S. government wants to make sure your investment amount is appropriate and sufficient to make your business successful. I'll give you 2 examples to illustrate. If you were to start a big company employing 100 people, running a manufacturing operation, then U.S. government may require or expect a significant investment, maybe multi-million dollars. But on the other hand, let's say you open up a small retail store, a packaging, shipping, or a little cafe, or something along those lines, then maybe 100,000 or maybe even less would be satisfactory. So the amount required depends on the type of business, and it's incumbent upon the applicant to show the visa officer that the amount invested is sufficient and appropriate for the type of business. Now, one of the biggest advantages of a franchise business investment is that the franchisors recommends or requires the investment amount, the budget. And visa officers usually will trust that investor provided budget significantly because the franchisor is the expert in that business. So whatever the franchisor says is the required amount, the visa officers typically will accept that amount. Okay. Now the law doesn't say any kind of minimum investment amount, and as a result, you could potentially qualify with a small investment amount. The smallest investment amount I've gotten E-2 approval was $35,000 investment. And so that is a proof that you can qualify for a smaller investment amount. But in the years of experience in this field, what I realized is that the smaller the amount, the more skeptical the visa officer becomes. So I typically recommend investing 100,000 or more to have a solid case. But it is definitely possible to qualify with less investment amount. It's just that it takes a little bit more convincing on the visa officer that the amount is adequate for your type of business. Another favorite question that people often ask is, what kind of business qualifies? And this is caused by the reason that the law is also very ambiguous on what kind of business qualifies. In fact, the U.S. government allows almost any type of business to qualify. They're not too concerned about what type of business. What they want to see is a business that will not only generate enough income to provide the investor and his or her family with a comfortable living in the United States, and a business that will create jobs for American workers, at least a few jobs within a reasonable time of business startup, and that the applicant has the qualifications and skills to successfully manage and operate the business. These are the key factors that immigration officers look at in deciding whether the business is qualifying. So typically I would recommend people choose businesses that clearly will require employees, meaning it would be nearly impossible for you to personally run the business on your own. This is especially important for a startup business because you're just starting. There's no history for the visa officers to look at, and they're looking at the future potential. So if the business model requires you to hire people, then naturally it's more likely for the visa officer to believe that you will in fact hire people. Now, the law doesn't require the investor for a brand new startup business to immediately hire employees. But of course, if you did hire at least 1 or 2 employees in the beginning prior to applying for the visa, it would make your visa E-2 application much stronger because you've already created jobs and it's not just a future potential. But you're not absolutely required to hire people if it's not necessary at the very inception, as so long as we demonstrate a genuine intent and need to hire people within a reasonable time of startup. Okay. Now, for a brand new business, U.S. government tries to be very reasonable in terms of financial performance. If it's a brand new business, they'll give you a few years to grow and develop business into profitability and financial success. You don't have to worry about showing profits in the first year or even second year. They will give you that time to grow the business to sufficient financial performance. In addition, you can either own the business on your own or you can have partnership. Okay, you can have a foreign partner or a U.S. partner. The key to remember here is that the E-2 applicant has to maintain at least 50% controlling interest in the U.S. business. Okay, and also the U.S. applicant needs to be the primary and substantial financial contributor to the business. Okay, So, and the remaining ownership could be other people, other partners, divided among multiple people. A very important E-2 visa requirement is lawful source of funds. And this is, not everybody understands this, because when you're thinking about investment, you're thinking about business model, business idea, business concept, and the investment amount. But this lawful source is very important in that U.S. immigration has to be assured that your investment funds come from a lawful source. We have to show the immigration officer that the money belongs to you, the applicant, as well as the money came from a lawful source. Okay, so there are many ways to demonstrate lawful source of your money. It could be savings from your employment income, investment income, could be your business profits, could be property sale. You can even get a personal loan from friends or family. Okay, and some people with wealthy, close family members, they could get a gift from close family member to fund the E-2 investment as well. Now, key thing to remember here is that wherever your money source is coming from, the money has to be held in the applicant's personal possession before it's invested into the U.S. business. So, for example, let's say you're getting a loan from friend or family member, and they need to transfer that money to the applicant's personal bank account so the applicant can invest the money directly from his or her bank account into the U.S. business. This is important because there are some people, not their fault, they don't fully appreciate the E-2 visa requirements, and they get the money from a third source, like a friend or family member or a bank or a business, and they directly transfer the money from the third source to the U.S. business, bypassing their own bank account. That could potentially disqualify and cause an E-2 visa denial. So always make sure the money is routed through your own personal bank account prior to investing in the U.S. business. The next point I want to touch upon is active commercial enterprise. So the E-2 visa requires the applicant to establish or acquire a for-profit business. They require the business to be one that is selling some sort of product or service, has a customer base, target market, and has physical business premises, a store, office, shop, warehouse, and a staff of U.S. employees. These are the factors they're looking for to demonstrate a real commercial enterprise. There are investments that what we call passive investments that do not qualify, such as investing in real estate for rental income, or investing in stocks or bonds, gold or precious metals. Those are considered passive investment. It's not a commercial business enterprise, and those passive investments do not qualify for the E-2 visa. Now, a very important point I want to bring up is when you're starting a new business, at what point can you apply for the E-2 investor visa? Well, the E-2 visa prohibits what's called a speculative investment, meaning a business investment that is very early stage. That's considered speculative investment. So U.S. immigration, they expect a startup business to be fully set up and developed, at least to the point of being ready to start operations before the applicant is allowed to apply for the visa, because the expectation is that the applicant will start running the business, generating income soon after getting the E-2 visa issuance. So U.S. government, they don't want a situation where when you apply for the visa, there's still significant business setup necessary, and there's significant time required before you're able to open and start running the business. So this is to keep in mind. And different businesses require different amount of setup time. If you're doing a service business, then the setup time might be short. But if you're doing, let's say, a more asset-intensive business like opening a restaurant, that would take much longer time because, securing the premises, building the restaurant, getting all the food, health department permits is very time-consuming. You want to keep that in mind as you're choosing your business, the amount of time necessary to set up the business to the point of being ready to open so that we can apply for the E-2 visa. The next point I want to touch upon is the investor's qualifications. Okay. So as I mentioned before, the E-2 visa requires the applicant to be personally involved in managing and operating a business. Now, there's no minimum requirements. There's no requirement you have certain degree or certain experience. We can present to the immigration officer any qualifications you have that are potentially relevant, whether it's education, whether it's work experience, entrepreneurship, anything that's relevant can be presented to demonstrate your business qualifications for the E-2 visa. Now, you can very well have no experience in the industry that you are getting into in your E-2 business, but you have experience in other industries in management, sales, customer service, or accounting. A lot of business skills, as you can imagine, are transferable to any industry. Okay, so don't worry if you don't worry about the needing to invest in a business that you have experience in. That's not necessary. And this is especially true if you decide to invest in a franchise business, which is oftentimes very favorable choice for E-2 applicants, E-2 candidates, because no matter what your background is, you're going to receive extensive training and support from the franchisor, very targeted training. And U.S. immigration, they see the franchise training as highly relevant, highly credible, because it's highly targeted training in that specific industry. I've had clients that had no business experience qualify for an E-2 visa based purely on the fact of investing in a franchise business and receiving that training, and was able to demonstrate impressive knowledge about how that business works at the visa interview, and was able to get the E-2 visa approval even though he had no business experience prior to this. Now, this is a commonly asked topic is, how do I apply for an E-2 investor visa? Okay. There are basically two ways. You can either apply at the U.S. Embassy in your home country, or if you come into the U.S. in a valid visa, it is possible for you to change visa status directly in the U.S. Now, there's pros and cons to both options, and which is better depends on your country, your personal circumstances, and your country of citizenship. For many nationalities, if you apply at the embassy, you can get potentially a longer E-2 visa, and the U.S. Embassy issue E-2 visa could potentially allow you to travel in and out of the U.S. On the other hand, if you change your visa in the U.S., it's convenient because you don't need to go back to your country and go to a visa interview at the U.S. Embassy. It's convenient if you do it in the U.S. However, changing visa status in the U.S. Doesn't authorize travel. It just grants authorization to stay in the U.S. while you're in the U.S. When you leave the U.S., you have to reapply for the E-2 visa at the U.S. Embassy before you can come in. So you kind of sacrifice that freedom to travel if you do a change of status in the U.S. For the convenience of doing everything in the U.S. Okay, but for some people, it may be appropriate to apply for change of status in the U.S., whether it's because their English is not super strong and you don't want to do an interview at the U.S. Embassy. You rather do a change of status in the United States, which has no interview, which the decision is made purely on the document submitted. Okay, or if you come from a country where the embassy issue visa does not offer multiple entry, then it doesn't. The embassy application doesn't really offer you an advantage. So in that case, it makes sense for you to apply for change of visa directly in the United States. Now, at this time, I'm going to give you a very informative brochure on how long the E-2 visa process takes. Gotten a lot of great feedback about this. I'm loading this on here so that you'll be able to download it. You know, that the brochure will tell you all the steps in the E-2 visa life cycle, and it will also give you an idea how long the process takes. Okay, so feel free to download that and use it as a resource. Okay. All right. And that concludes my portion of the presentation. I'm gonna turn it over to Sheila.
Hello. Hey, Bobby.
Hi.
Bobby, thank you so much. That was very helpful. I hope that it helped already clarify a lot of people's questions about the E-2 visa, but I want to remind everybody that at the end, we are going to also open for some Q&A, so you will have some opportunity to ask more questions. I also see that Stephanie is already helping us answer some of the key questions coming in. I'm pretty sure that as some questions are answered, more questions are showing up. And that's fine. Okay, I hope everybody is also seeing the answers that Stephanie is typing in the room. And thank you so much again, Bobby, for your talk. I'm just leaving a few more seconds so people can download the infographic with the 7-step E-2 visa process. Okay, and then I'll move on and share my presentation. So there you go. Bobby, can you confirm that you can see my screen?
I can. Beautiful.
Excellent.
PowerPoint.
So I'm going to, as I get started, load here a quick poll. I want to ask all of you a question. I want you to make a guess of what percentage of the E-2 visa cases, and this is based on Bobby Chung's law firm experience so far with all the hundreds of franchise-based E-2 visa cases that they have submitted. So I wanted to make a guess of what percentage of these cases has been approved. And I'll give the answer shortly during my presentation. So before I get started telling you more about the franchising industry, I just want to, again, explain what my company does, Franchise Wizards. We are a franchise consulting company, and the way we can help you as you go through ideas for investment for your E-2 visa is by helping you select franchises for your investment, and we are connected with all the franchise directors. We are very knowledgeable on the different types of business models, and we can share more information with you and put you in contact with them as we start investigating those franchises. We also have a network of professionals that we're connected to, such as funding partners, immigration attorneys like Bobby Chung, business attorneys that can help you open your business entity in the US, accountants, business coaches, and more. And we'll make sure to make all of these people available to help you as you go through this process. We don't charge for these services to you, and the reason for that is because we are paid by the franchisors. We help connect them with qualified candidates that can potentially become franchisees in their network. And in case you decide to join our network, we are commissioned by the franchisors. The last thing I want to say is that we work with 500 franchises all across the US in several industries. For those who are not very familiar with what franchising is, I just included one slide explaining the definition of franchising. And franchising is a business model in which the franchisor, the franchising company, will give you a license, will give you training, will give you support, will give you systems that allow you to operate, and will enable you to operate under their brands as well as sell their products or services. And for someone who is looking into making an investment in the US for the very first time, you have never lived here, you don't know the local market, there are many nice benefits for going with the franchising model. And I think the biggest one is that franchising is a model that has been proven to work before by someone that started that business at first in the US. It has also been proved to be replicable. That person has already started already a few other units on their own, and then they have franchised their business with a lot of new franchisees in their network. And they have usually a lot of data to prove that the network is working and that the franchisees are going well, which usually are able to validate as you investigate the franchises. Also, for you who are just starting a business in the US for the first time, you have the ability to know the starting and operating costs because the franchisor will share all these details with you, not only through presentations and calls, but also through a document that is a legal document called Franchise Disclosure Document. And that will tell you the breakdown of all the costs associated with your initial investments, as well as the monthly costs to operate the franchise. So you have a very good knowledge rather than starting your own business for the first time. You can also start with an established brand. A lot of these franchises are already well recognized in the US, which helps you get your customers more easily. In addition to that, I think one of the biggest benefits is that the franchisors, they give you, especially, this is something about the nature of franchises in the US, but usually the trainings are very thorough. They have amazing marketing systems. They have back office and operating systems that they will make available for you. And a lot of these franchises even have call centers that can help you get your first customers quotes and schedules and book appointments, which helps you building your customer base. So I want to answer the question. I saw in the poll here that basically some of you think it was 95%, 94%, or 76% approval rate. And based on Bobby Chung's law office experience, their current rate of approval of franchise-based E-2 visa cases is 94%. So I wanted to highlight that because I know there is a misconception in the market sometimes whether franchises are compatible with the E-2 visa. So not only I want to highlight Bobby Chung's experience because he has shared this data with us, but in addition to that, a lot of the franchises that I work with, these are franchises very used to dealing with E-2 visa. They have already a lot of E-2 visa franchisees in their network as well. And we can help point you in the direction of which franchises already have that level of experience. The franchising industry in the US, I want to share with you some nice numbers. It's a very large industry. There are 3,000 franchise concepts in the US. They are spread among a lot of business categories. And I have here a pie chart to just show you the diversity of business areas. And you can see that the fast food restaurants are just 20% of the franchising market. It really goes around a lot of different industries. So for you as an investor, we can really help you show the different types of businesses you could start, and we can help refine a selection based on your preferences and areas of expertise. The investment levels to start a franchise can really vary from as little as $10,000 to over $1 million, depending on the type of franchise. But there is a sweet spot. A lot of the franchises, they vary in between $50,000 starting costs up to about $250,000, $300,000. So there is a sweet spot with a lot of options for you, right at that range that Bobby is suggesting of about $100,000. And there is a good indicator in the market, which is the renewal rate of franchise agreements after they expire, after usually 5 to 10 years from initial contract. And the renewal rate from franchisees is 95% across the franchising industry, which really shows that this is a model that is working really well in the US. I also want to just share with you again about the franchising industry. It is a very solid industry. By itself, it generates about $840 billion in revenues in the US, 8.5 million jobs, and 770,000 establishments exist in the US, which are franchises. So it's really impressive number. I'm showing here the logos of a lot of these franchises, just so you can take a look and have an idea of the diversity of franchises that we work with. And I want to make the point also that it's way much more than just food and beverage franchises, as we're always used to, and the first thing we think about when we think about franchising. Now, when it comes to the E-2 visa, there are many different types of franchise models that can be compatible and that are used to working with E-2 visa candidates. Here, I am segmenting them by retail types of franchises. Those are franchises that usually have a storefront. A lot of them are located in typical malls in the US. Some of them may be located in light industrial zones, which usually are real estate options that can be a little cheaper. But when it comes to retail types of franchises, remember that there is a cost, a build out cost, inventory cost, equipment cost, and so on. So usually the initial investment is a little higher than if you go with a service-based franchise. That's the only distinction I want to make. A few options here for you when it comes to E-2 can be on the retail side, convenience stores, gyms and fitness clubs, tutoring franchises. These are children education franchises, spas, auto body shops, or automotive franchises. There's a lot of packing and shipping options or sign companies, graphic companies, and so on, as well as, of course, all the food franchise options. And service can also be a very interesting option because usually the starting cost can be a little lower. And even though it's lower than $100,000, which is usually what is recommended, you can still justify that over year one, you will be spending at least $100,000 because you have all the operating capital and some other marketing expenses that you project for your year one, in addition to the initial investment. But some categories here can be residential cleaning, commercial cleaning franchises, property management, senior care. I'll talk a little bit more about that. These are some very famous types of franchises currently in the US, very popular. So as I said before, I just wanted to show here some examples of categories and usually what the investment level is. But I'll be happy to work with each one of you and we can work together to look into more details and specific brands. Today, I want to highlight 3 examples of franchises that usually are solid business models and popular in the US. One that is really growing is the category of home-based senior care franchises. With this type of franchise, you are a senior care agency, you hire caregivers, train caregivers, and you work with families that have senior relatives that are looking for specific cares in their own homes. You allocate the caregivers and sell those services that we call in-home non-medical services. So the types of services that the caregivers provide here can be companionship, help the elderly person take a shower, feed, take them to grocery store, take them to the doctor, remind them to take medication, any type of care that is called non-medical. It's a very, very large industry. It's actually the fastest growing segment in healthcare in the US today. And as you can only imagine, the US population is only aging over the next years. So it is expected that 20% of the population will be over 65 years old by 2030, which is a huge number of people. So it is a very large industry. It is considered recession-proof, so no matter the economic state of the country, there is always a need for these types of services. And the families that hire these types of services, they will pay you usually on a weekly or monthly basis, which can really create for your repeat customer base. Also, I should mention that you need only a small number of families to achieve high revenues with this type of business because of the monthly fees that typically they will pay you. Another good example are the property management franchises. That's another very large industry. It's estimated in $73 billion. And about 30% of the properties in the US are rental, which gives you an idea of the size of the market. As a property manager, you'll be managing the real estate, that property for the property owners, either commercial or residential. You help them collect the rents, manage the maintenance services or security services, trash and recycling schedules. You can legally represent the property owners, and you can also help find tenants for their properties. It's, again, another recession-proof type of business where you receive that recurring revenue because you develop a repeat customer base. And you can develop here multiple profit centers by offering them a series of different types of services. My third example today are sign companies. Sign companies are businesses that cater for small to medium and sometimes even large businesses. And you have a light manufacturing type of facility in a light industrial area where you manufacture signs of different types. So I posted here some pictures of types of signs you would be manufacturing and offering companies, including car wraps, bus wraps. There is one person from a franchise in the sign company industry that actually had Disney as their account in all the bus wraps, which can be really cool. So the clients here, usually they are repeat. About 80% of the clients of sign companies tend to be repeat clients that will come back to you as they need extra banners, extra car wraps, signs, and other things. It's also, for someone who likes technology, it's an industry that is always innovating with new technology. So you're always learning something new. So it can be really fun. Okay, switching gears quickly, I just want to tell you a little bit about our process as we work with you. Usually we'll schedule a call with you, which is an assessment where we just get more information about your background, your goals, your business preferences, and how much money you would like to invest. Based on that, we'll do some research in our database and we'll schedule with you a presentation call where we go over the business models and explain why we chose them for you to take a look at and investigate more deeply. And as you decide to investigate these models, we will help you through all the investigation process. We are going to introduce you to the franchise founders and directors we have access to. We'll put you on a discovery process in which you will have access to a lot of information and legal documentation so you can really answer all your questions. And at the end, you should be able to make a final informed decision. So my offer for you today is to go ahead and, as you can schedule with us. And let me load my offer here. You can schedule with us a complimentary business strategy session so you can learn more about you can basically share with us more about your goals, and we're going to be happy to then talk to you and help refine franchise options for you. I also want to share with you, as I said before, that this is the first webinar of a series of webinars we are going to host over the next months and weeks, and we have a schedule that we're going to share with you. The first webinar that I want to invite you to come to is what I call a franchisor spotlight session. And we're going to start hosting at least one per month. I'm super excited about that project because by this project, what I'll do is I'm going to invite some specific franchise companies that I know are very good business models, solid franchises that I know have very good training and support systems in place. And I want them to share their story with you and explain more about the business model in a webinar setting. The first one I want to invite you to come is the franchisor spotlight sessions, which we're going to, is the You Move Me franchise, which is a moving business that allows you to operate under this brand. The nice thing about this type of business model is that it's not a model that would be replaced by technology. It's usually a need. So we also consider that recession resistant. By being this model, you will need a few trucks, maybe 2 or 3 to start. They can tell you more. And the ramp up is usually fast in the beginning. So I'm also going to include here for you an offer for you to register for these upcoming webinars so you can learn more. So I'm going to display my offer here. And as I said, this is just one of the upcoming webinars. I want to share a schedule here. After this webinar, we're also going to have another Franchise Spotlight webinar, which is the company Property Management Inc. And it's a property management franchise, very nice one. I think you will really like to learn about their business model. So in the future, I'll be sending some notifications for you so you know and you can register for that webinar. We are also going to host the same webinar as we did today, 2 more times and more times in the future, but we already have 2 others in the schedule. One is on July 26th and the other one is on August 9th. So for your friends and anyone who has not been able to come, we want you to please share with them and invite them to come. And of course, you're always welcome to join us again. I also want to ask you and invite you to like us on Facebook. We have some reviews there that you can read so you can learn more about our services. And that's where we also post news about upcoming webinars as well as articles about the franchising industry. So it's a great resource for you to continue being educated on franchises in the US. So with that, I want to thank you all for watching our webinars. Bobby and I are really happy to have you here. And right now we're going to open for questions and we'll answer them live on video. Excellent. So let me come here to the chat window and I'm going to ask Stephanie to please help us. Let us know what are some of the questions that have been coming through the chat window. I also invite everybody to type your questions right now. I also have about 3 questions, Bobby, that a few clients asked me to ask today. Mm-hmm. So you can cover and maybe I can get started while Stephanie can highlight some questions for us. The first question I have is, I have seen in a WhatsApp group on the E-2, people were asking is if when you apply for E-2 visa and when you move to the US, do you need to keep any assets, real estate, anything in your home country, kind of to show that you're not being a permanent resident? Is there any requirement around that?
Sure, that's a great question. And there's some misunderstanding among folks for very good reasons. E-2 visa is a temporary visa, and most U.S. temporary visa do require the foreign national to maintain a home in your country, assets, to show that you will leave the U.S. on time and go back home. You have a good reason to go back home. However, the E-2 visa is very different. E-2 visa basically allows you to move you and your family to the United States and allows you to live here for years and years and years. So E-2 visa is a bit of an exception among temporary U.S. visas. It does not require you to maintain a home in your country. It does not require you to maintain assets in your home country. In fact, the law says you can sell off your home, sell off your asset, and move your whole family to the United States. The only assurance that U.S. government requires is that you, as the applicant, you understand it's a temporary visa, and that you promise you will leave the U.S. before the visa expires, but you're perfectly able to renew the visa at the U.S. Embassy and come back to the U.S. to extend your stay. In fact, U.S. government wants you to stay longer if your business is doing well and employing people. They don't want you to quit. So the short answer is you do not need to maintain assets or home in your home country for the E-2 investor visa.
Perfect. I see some questions from Nina. So Nina, I'll go ahead and bring those up so Bobby and I can address. Nina is asking that she's working on selecting the right franchise for her. And these franchises, they are service-based franchises and they are home-based. She's also saying that the starting investment are $66,000 to $85,000 US dollars. I will start answering, Bobby, and then I'll let you complement, okay?
Sure.
Service-based franchises can be applicable for the E-2 visa, and I do know a lot that have E-2 visa franchisees in their network. But you cannot, as far as I can understand, and I'll let Bobby reiterate, but you cannot have a home-based business. Some franchises, they have models that sometimes can be home-based, but for the E-2, you would need to have some type of physical location, like a small office, for example. Right, Bobby? Would you like to add to that?
Sure. That was a great answer. Let me just elaborate on that. The law doesn't say you can't have a home-based business. The reason having a office is important especially for a brand new startup small business, is because the E-2 visa does not want a very, very small business that will not likely create jobs and make a meaningful contribution to U.S. economy. So when you start a brand new business and it's small, it's service oriented, there's no track record for the immigration officer to look at the economic impact of the business because you're just getting started. So they're focusing on the potential of the business and your business setup and development efforts. Now, if it's a brand new small business and there's no history to look at, and all you've created is a home-based business, then the likelihood is that the immigration officer is going to believe this business is too small, not serious enough, doesn't have sufficient potentiality of creating jobs. That's the risk of having a home-based startup small business presents. So if you could just modify that a little bit, get a commercial office separate from your home, then that could take the business across the line and convince immigration that you're serious enough to make this business sufficient size down the road to make an impact for the U.S.
That's great, Bobby. Thank you. I see Flavia's question about their friends that have started their own business for the E-2, and they thought that someone told them that franchises would not apply. So I think I'm assuming they started an independent business, and they are thinking about changing to a franchise model. She wants to know if they could, if you start, and actually that's a question I have seen other people ask before. A couple questions here, Bobby. I'll elaborate a little more. If you start one business and in the middle of these 2 to 5 years, you want to switch into a new business, could you do that, switch with your own E-2 visa? And the other question is, if you have the E-2 visa with one business, can you also have a second business not associated with the E-2 visa?
Another great question. So the E-2 visa is issued authorizing the applicant to operate the business that was described in the E-2 application. Okay. Now you could have changes to the business. You can expand your investment, invest in additional business, or make changes to your business. However, if the change is considered significant, then immigration may require you to reapply for the E-2 visa to get approval and authorization to run the newly modified or new business. Now, that's what the law requires. But here is how it works in reality. Okay. Let's say you were granted an E-2 visa for a specific business and you make some changes. Let's say you add a second unit, second store, or you add more products to your product line. Well, that type of change or expansion is perfectly okay. And you can keep your E-2 visa, and when you renew the visa, you can explain the modifications or the expansion in the renewal application. Okay. However, if the change is bigger than that, let's say you shut down the original business and you start up a completely different business. Now the original business that was approved is not even operating anymore, and you're doing something completely different. In that type of scenario, you would have to reapply for the E-2 visa right away to get new authorization to run the new business.
Awesome. I see. Let me highlight this one here. Keith Roy is asking, what can my role in the new business be? Can I be in sales?
Sure. The role of the E-2 entrepreneur is that you need to be the primary executive manager in charge of the business. Okay. And that entails all aspects of overseeing and running the business. You can be in sales, of course. You need to be in management. Depending on the size and scope of the business, you can be involved in many aspects of the business. But what immigration, they don't want you to do is the menial work, the low-level work. They want you to delegate those type of work to employees. But anything on a high level, whether it's in sales, accounting, management, human resources, all of that, as an E-2 entrepreneur, you can be fully involved in.
Excellent. Beto here is asking, what happens when your son becomes 21 years old?
Yes, this is common question with people with older children. So there are a few different options. If they are in university at that time, then what they can do is apply for a change to an F1 student visa so they can continue their education in the United States. Okay. Another option is if they're not going to school and they want to be in business like you, then they can apply for an E-2 visa on their own. You can gift them the money, and also you could potentially make them a partner in your business and then qualify your child, your adult child, as your business partner and qualify for in your child qualify for E2 visa as quote unquote E2 investor. That's a possibility. E2 visa allows up to two E2 investors to both qualify for the E2 visa. There are
Excellent.
some people would get a degree and then and apply for a working visa, get sponsored by an American company, and go and work under an employment visa. So those are the few options available.
Okay. Let's see. There are lots of questions, which is great. Flavia is asking that she heard the option to put money in an escrow account, and how does that work? Would you
Sure.
like to go over, Bobby? Yeah.
Sure. Happy to do so. So the E2 visa requires you to make a irrevocable financial commitment to the U.S. business, and U.S. immigration understand that it's kind of scary to invest the money and with the potential risk of not getting E2 visa. So U.S. immigration will allow you to commit your investment money in an escrow account that is conditioned on the closing of the escrow is conditioned on E2 visa approval, and that the only way for the escrow for the money to be returned to you is a E2 visa denial. So as long as all the conditions of the contract have been satisfied, except the E2 visa approval as the contingency, you can place the money in an escrow and qualify that money as E2 investment funds. How that works in real life is, let's say you buy a franchise business. Okay, there's two types of investment. There's buying an existing business. There's starting a new business. If you're buying an existing business, you'll be required to deposit the full purchase money into an escrow account with the condition of E2 visa approval. Upon E2 visa approval, the money will be transferred to the seller and the franchisor, and the ownership of the business will be transferred to you. Okay. If you're starting a brand new business, you could negotiate with the franchisor to put some or all of the franchise fee into an escrow account, so that upon approval, the franchise fee gets transferred to the franchisor. This is not always available. It depends on the franchisor's willingness and the negotiation.
Okay. Bobby, there is a question from Mauricio here about the wife or spouse of an E2 visa owner, if they
Mm-hmm.
can work in the franchise or the business, and if so, can the company sponsor the green card of the spouse?
Happy to answer that. So the spouse of an E2 investor can get a working permit that will allow the spouse to work anywhere in the United States for your own company or for other people's business. Now, if the spouse is working for other people's business, not yours, other people's, the other employer could potentially sponsor the spouse for employment green card. If the spouse is working for your own business, your company normally cannot sponsor your spouse for employment green card. And the reason is employment green card normally requires employers to prove that they cannot find a qualified American worker. They have to recruit and put job advertising to demonstrate good faith effort to find a qualified American worker. And if you're sponsoring your own wife or husband, immigration does not believe that you will objectively, fairly give the job opportunity to an American worker. You probably try to disqualify everybody so that your spouse can get a green card. So they don't allow sponsorship by your own business or where the owner has family relationship to the sponsored employee.
And Bobby, is there any path for a green card for someone who applies for the E2 visa?
Yes, there is. There are a few options. One, people that with the financial resources, they can increase their investments to qualify for the EB5 investment green card. known as the $1 million investment green card. That $1 million could be reduced to $500,000 if the business is located in an economically disadvantaged area. So if you keep increasing your investment, let's say you buy more franchise unit or you expand your franchise business, and where you reach the $500,000, $1 million mark, and you have 10 or more full-time employees, then you can apply for the EB-5 investment green card. So that's option number one. Option number two is where, as I mentioned before, the spouse can get a working permit, work for an American employer that's not related to you, and request an employer to sponsor the spouse for employment green card. That's another option. A couple other options. I've had clients win the visa lottery, the green card lottery. Have many of my E2 clients win the lottery. The chance is not big, but I don't know if it's karma or something. I've helped many of my clients convert to lottery green card. It's amazing. And some people have like U.S. citizen sibling or parents who sponsor them for green card. And because the wait for those type of green card can be many, many, many years, they would use the E2 visa to live in the United States while they're waiting for that family green card to become current.
If the spouse is working for a separate company, Bobby, like the spouse has a working visa and they work for another corporation, they could potentially get a green card from the corporation on their jobs?
Yes, absolutely. We have employment green cards where a U.S. company can sponsor their foreign employee for employment green card. So the E2 spouse, as you know, is able to get the spousal work permit that allows the spouse to work anywhere. So the spouse can get a job with the foreign company, and I mean the U.S. company, U.S. employer, who then will be able to sponsor them for green card. So I typically, if this is the long-term goal is to qualify for immigration. Sometimes it's a good idea to have the spouse with better professional qualifications to apply as the E2 dependent, so that spouse is able to then go out into the marketplace and have an easier time find a good job, a professional quality job, and then have the employer sponsor him or her for employment green card.
Excellent. So we're just a little past noon here. I think we need to end the webinar, but we do have a lot of questions that came in. So I think what we can do is invite you to please reach out to us by email. And I'm going to add again here our contact information. So you and follow up with you. We also have a copy of all the questions that came in, so we can also potentially reach out to you directly and try to answer some of these questions. But I want to just say some final comments here. I want to thank everybody for staying here with us. I hope this session was educational and helped answer many of your questions. We are happy to work with you as you continue your quest for the E2 visa. I know it's a big project and a big change in our lives. And Bobby and I are passionate about being able to help you achieve the dream of moving to the US and owning a business here. So Bobby, any final words?
I just want to thank everybody for joining us, and would love opportunity to work with you. If you have any questions, you're most welcome to reach out to me or my staff. And it's been an absolute pleasure and joy to be here today. And I hope you join us for more sessions in the future, and look forward to meeting all of you and speaking with all of you one of these days.
Thank you all, everyone. And again, we see a lot of questions, so we will be following up with you and make sure your questions are answered by email, okay? Thank you all. Bye-bye, and I hope you all have a great day.